Hey guys, so great to be here. So we are back in Fort Mill, South Carolina. Now you guys have probably seen my other videos about Fort Mill, but I thought it was important to come back because we're going to talk about some other things that I have not talked about before. So if this is your first time to the channel, awesome. If it's your second time, third or fifth, still awesome. But I wanted to start the day at one of my favorite spots in Fort Mill, which is, of course, the Humble Cup. Now, the Humble Cup is an adorable coffee shop. Let's go in and get a cup before we get the day started. So I didn't go for my usual iced coffee. Instead, I got a chai latte. I know, not my usual, but they make a delicious chai tea latte. You cannot miss it. One of my favorites, only beat out by the one right downtown in the center of Fort Mill. So let's dive into it. If you're looking for a channel that's everything Charlotte, North Carolina, the ins, the outs, North and South Carolina, because that's where we are today, you've come to the right channel. Be sure to go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe so you can stay on top of all the videos that I post. And if you want to know every time I post a video and truly watch them all, go ahead and hit that notification bell and I'll make sure you're notified every time I drop a video. Now, I truly get calls, texts, emails, Zoom invites every single day from people just like you looking to move to the Charlotte and surrounding areas, including South Carolina. So if that's you, whether it's 9 days or 90 days from now, whether you're moving across the country, across town, or across the world, I'm giving a shout out to you, Dubai. You give me a shout, I will make sure your move is exactly what you want it to be. So today, as I said, we're in Fort Mill, South Carolina, one of my favorite towns in South Carolina, actually. And there's a few reasons for that I won't get into just yet because we have a lot of content that I'm going to be sharing with you today. So we're going to talk about not only the town, some of the statistics when it has to do with Fort Mill, but we're also going to talk a little bit about real estate and the housing market as well as available neighborhoods. And we're going to talk about commutes and some of my favorite haunts. So you are in for a treat. So let's talk a little bit about the stats of Fort Mill, South Carolina. This town, which I absolutely love, this town has grown substantially in the last 3 years. In fact, it's got 24,000 people that live in the town. Now, granted, that's going to change probably by the time you watch this video. But what I find is, I'm going to say very impressive with that growth is the fact that it grew 225%. 225% since 2020. Now, we all knew that there was a boom when it came to real estate, but so many people came down to Fort Mill. But why? Well, a lot of people were coming in from out of town, just like you probably, or people leaving Charlotte. Now, a lot of that had to do with affordability of homes, great schools, opportunity for job growth, and there's more room. That's right. Fort Mill seems like it's one of those towns where nobody knew it was here until things started to expand in Charlotte, and then all of a sudden, everybody realized this was the place you wanted to be. So you're going to find that there's a lot of home developments that are coming through, a lot of custom homes as well, not only in the $400,000 ranges, but also up into the multi-millions. That's right, here in Fort Mill. So let's talk a little bit about some of the other factors. Let's talk about cost of living. Now, Fort Mill, while yes, it's just outside of Charlotte and the taxes are lower and there are more affordable homes, what you're going to find is Fort Mill is actually about 6.5 higher when we're talking cost of living. Now, let me lay that out for you. If we're looking at the overall U.S. cost of living being at 100, Fort Mill comes in at 106.5. It's not that drastically different from the U.S. average, and it is still very affordable. Many people are moving down to Fort Mill, South Carolina, not only for the tax savings, but let's highlight schools. Fort Mill has some of the best schools in the region. And when I say region, I'm talking the Charlotte and surrounding region. And with that combination, along with the affordable houses and the nice spread, which when I reference that, I mean not everybody's on top of each other, there's room, this becomes one of the most ideal places to live. And in fact, with the way that it's growing, it is going to start meeting or matching the rate of growth in Charlotte. How cool is that? So I'm going to finish enjoying my chai latte and I'll get back to you in just a second. So, of course, there's plenty of things that you can love about Fort Mill. One of them has to do with commute time. So, if we're to go ahead and look at a map, Fort Mill is located just below the North Carolina border in South Carolina. One of the advantages to this is short commute distances into Charlotte. Now, as we know, Charlotte is one of the main hubs when we're talking about industry, healthcare, you name it. And there's a lot of growth in business. There is growth in Fort Mill as well, but a lot of people commute into Charlotte and the surrounding areas. So being right underneath that border is going to make it much easier for you to get into work, school, etc. A lot of people do live in Fort Mill and commute into the Charlotte area and surroundings, so this could be a good centralized location. Now, one thing I always like to point out about Fort Mill, if we're looking at a map, is while it is centrally located right across the South Carolina border, if you were to follow it, it kind of flanks down following the North Carolina line. Now, this is where it turns into Indian land, and it borders towns in North Carolina like Marvin and Waxhaw, which are two very desirable locations. So, what are some of the other advantages to the actual location of Fort Mill? One of the other major advantages is also the closeness to Lake Wylie. Now, there is a town, Lake Wylie. I'm talking about the lake itself. While we have Lake Norman up on the northern side of Charlotte, if those in South Carolina wanted to go to the lake, usually they're going to choose Lake Wylie because of its closeness. We are right next to Lake Wylie in this particular location in Fort Mill, so it makes it easy for you to go have a fun weekend trip, take the boat out, or even go out on an evening. So let's talk actual drive times. If you are coming from Fort Mill, where we are right now in the downtown area, into the center of Charlotte, you're probably looking at about a 25-minute commute, give or take. If you're going all the way to the north side on the outskirts of 45, where it intersects up kind of near the Huntersville area, you're going to be looking at probably about a 40-minute drive. Still very reasonable when you're thinking about the advantages of living in this area. Now, while few people are going to be commuting out into the Concord area or the Gastonia area, both of those commute times are still about 45 minutes, sometimes 50, depending upon where you're going within those areas. But one of the most advantageous areas is the Ballantyne area. Ballantyne is one of the major hubs for industry, and I'm not talking about the auto industry or banking. Actually, it's got a lot of industry when it comes to not only doctors, attorneys, and real estate, but even more than that. Now, Ballantyne actually has a huge corporate, or should I say commercial park, which was recently sold in the last couple of years and was one of the biggest sales in real estate commercially in North Carolina in history, which is really great. Don't worry, all the businesses stayed. It was just who owns the actual corporate park. Now, the commute time to Ballantyne in that particular area is only about 20 minutes. Now, you might be thinking, I can get downtown in 25, but that one's 20. That's right, because you're going to end up turning into a couple of back roads or side roads, or basically not interstates, to get into Ballantyne. So there's several different ways to do it. Now, one thing I do want to point out, Fort Mill is very vast. So you've got this upper part right underneath North Carolina, but it flanks down. If you are in the southernmost part of Fort Mill, you might as well be in Rock Hill, and it's all back roads. Your commute times will vary. So when you're looking that up on a map, make sure you know when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about this downtown area to those other locations. It makes a big difference, and it could add or subtract by about 15 minutes on any of your commute times. So let's go do a little bit of walking. I'm going to show you the town, and let's talk a little bit about what Fort Mill has to offer. So if we talk about the economy in Fort Mill, again, one of the other reasons why people love to be here, it's actually outpacing the U.S. economy by quite a bit. Now, when they do the measurements on this, they're looking over the future or projected 10-year growth. Now, the U.S. is going to be at about 33% in growth, but Fort Mill is outpacing it, looking at closer to 45% growth, which is huge. So let's look about what's happening right now. The unemployment rate currently in Fort Mill is 4.5%, while the U.S. average is actually at 6%. In fact, there's been an increase in the last couple of months in jobs in Fort Mill of about 1.6%. Now, to some that might not sound like a lot, but when we're talking about the overall population, that's several hundred jobs that have been created in just the last few months. And coming out of the pandemic, it's always nice to see growth. So what can we expect in the future? Well, as I said, there is a growth in the number of people that are living here, over 225% growth since 2020, like I mentioned earlier. So where are people going to go? This is the question I get a lot. What you're going to notice, and what I'm going to show you, is there's plenty of property, plenty of land available in and around Fort Mill. So we have new developments going up all the time. We have resale coming on the market. And there's also a really big percentage of people that are just purchasing land and either building a house or building a few houses. Hey, if you want that family compound, come to Fort Mill. I'm just kidding. But honestly, there is a ton of land available. So that is why there's so much growth here, because it's so much easier to do. Now, when we talk about infrastructure, this is where we talk about one of the pros and one of the cons of Fort Mill. With the increase in population, there's going to start becoming an overpopulation in the schools. Well, Fort Mill already thought about all that, and as the population has grown, they have consistently started building and opening new schools in and around the area. So the pro is you've got brand new schools with great ratings, as I had mentioned earlier. The con is if your child is in one of those schools and there's another school being built nearby, they might be moved to the newer of the schools. So pro con, but your kids are going to get a great education. So I think it's a win-win. So there are plenty of neighborhoods in Fort Mill and the surrounding areas. The one we're in right now would not be considered new construction, but all of these homes were built in more recent years. In fact, one of the oldest homes in here is only dating back to 2015. Now, what you'll notice is in this particular neighborhood, we're going to see brick homes, we're going to see mostly two-story, and we're going to have some, in my opinion, favorite, which is the craftsman style, which are all kind of sprinkled in together. So let's take a look at a couple of these houses. So one thing to note about different styles of home. Craftsman style, which I think there's a little bit of a misnomer on that. Craftsman style doesn't mean that the home is older, doesn't mean that it's an old 1930s home. In fact, that particular style has been brought back in recent years, and Fort Mill has a lot of different developments that actually specialize or have I guess you could say, a particular soft spot for the craftsman style, and you're going to see that in many of the homes and developments that are out here. Now, while most homes, I would say larger percentage of homes in Fort Mill are newer construction, the 2000s or newer, there are older homes. But what you're going to notice is they're a lot smaller. So the homes that are older are going to be a lot smaller, and usually they're going to be on larger lots, which is really interesting. So the home values in Fort Mill, the average home price is about $450,000. Now, many people who perhaps have lived here for a while or started looking at houses in Fort Mill a long time ago, what you're going to notice is over the last year, there's been an increase of about 19%. I should take that back, in the last 2 years. We've been an increase of about 19% in home values in the area. Now, for those of you that are looking to buy a home, you might be thinking, well, is this the right time? And if you're selling a home, you might also be thinking, is this the right time? Here's one thing that I will tell you. If you are moving into the area, the values are going to keep going up. So is it better to get in now and allow yourself to go ahead and get all that appreciation and equity in the home, or wait and wait and wait till it's more expensive? Personally, I think it's a better idea to go ahead if there's an area that has such intense growth, like an area like Fort Mill. Get in now, go ahead and set up some roots and get that equity in the house. And Fort Mill has a lot of opportunity when it comes to either new construction or even resale. So there's a lot of options hitting the market. They also have a lot of really great communities which have townhouses as well. So if you don't want a single family, that is completely fine. But the market in Fort Mill is strong and it's still growing. I could not pass up a trip to Hobo's when we were here in Fort Mill, South Carolina. So we popped in and I grabbed one of my favorite on the menu. Yes, it's basic, it's simple, but it is one of the best burgers in town. Now, if you're looking for a little bit of great atmosphere, inside is always popping when it comes to sports and entertainment, but they have this great side back patio that overlooks the train tracks and the Veterans Park. So if you're looking for a great spot in the afternoon or the evening, definitely check out Hobo's. Now, you're gonna catch me on camera now trying to get this burger in my mouth, so let's see how this works out. Fort Mill, South Carolina, undeniably one of my favorite spots just outside of Charlotte. Now, you might have already fallen in love with it, and if you have, that's great. But we went through just about everything today. Some of my favorite spots, our favorite food, favorite coffee, and some commute times and home values. So there's a lot to know about Fort Mill. So if you're thinking about making the move, go ahead and check below in the description. I've got all of my contact information. Be sure to call, text, email, or even a Zoom invite, and we can chat about your move. Now, whether it's 9 days or 90 days from now, if you're moving across town or across the world, be sure to reach out. I'd love to help you make your move everything you want it to be. So until next time, I look forward to showing you around town.